What's going on, guys? It's Worrell Thomas, your real estate advisor servicing the Metro Atlanta area. I put this page together to help people like you. If you're thinking to move to Atlanta, Georgia, or if you currently live here in Atlanta, Georgia, you want to make a move or just want to know what's going on in the real estate market, this page is for you. So you're going to see things like what it's like to live in certain cities. We're going to talk about the real estate market, and you might even see some interviews with investors and business owners here in Atlanta. My goal is just to give you the overall vibe of what's going on in the city and then just shed some light on some cool things that's going on as well. So without further ado, let's get into this video because I think it's very important. A lot of people are confused on what's going on in the real estate market, especially over the past 2 to 3 years. So we're going to be breaking that down in this specific video, but you need to stay tuned because this is a whole series. I'm really breaking down the home buying process. So we're going to do it from the beginning stages of just understanding the market and coming up with your plan to the final stages of you taking your key and moving into that house. So without further ado, let's get into it. So you're probably wondering, how did we end up in the situation that we're in right now? I'm going to date it back to COVID. Of course, the real estate market has been around a while. It has its ebbs and flows. It's had its times where it's crashed in the past, and it's had its booms as well. But for what's affecting us right now, let's start with COVID because that's when it got confusing. In 2020, I would say around April, because around April in the real estate market, a lot of people didn't know what was going to happen. A lot of people anticipated that the market was probably going to crash or it was just going to stall for a little while. And the reason why is you have sellers or potential home sellers who changed their mind about selling their house and said, you know what? I don't know what's really going on with this pandemic thing. I've never had to do this before. So I'm just going to hold off and just wait this thing out. Okay, so now we don't have homes for sale. At the same time, buyers were saying, well, I don't know if I want to make a big financial decision in this time of uncertainty. So now you don't have buyers purchasing homes. And of course, realtors are like, well, if nobody's going to be selling homes and nobody's going to be buying, then what do I do? So everybody started panicking, right? So here's what happened. The government steps in and they're like, we're going to stimulate the economy. How about this? We're going to give our citizens some money. We're going to give you $500 here, $1,500 there, but we're going to give you some money that you can spend in the economy. Thank you, government. We appreciate it. And at the same time, we're going to go ahead and lower interest rates. We're going to make them very low and we're going to keep them low for a little while. So you can only imagine with having extra money in your pocket and it being very cheap to get a loan, you can imagine a lot of people is going out there to spend money. So you have people going out there buying cars, of course, houses. And if there's not that many cars and houses out there, then eventually you're going to have a supply and demand problem, which is kind of what led to where we are right now. They held the mortgage rates very low going up to 2022, even as inflation started rising. So what happens when the economy or people in the economy have a lot of money and loans are very cheap to get? You have a supply and demand issue. You have a lot of people wanting a certain product, right? Creating demand. So if there's not a lot of people selling their homes, then of course, home values are going to continue to go up. So that's what we started to see in 2020. We saw it throughout 2021. And even for most of the year 2022. About mid-2021, everything was going good. A lot of people were purchasing homes and watching values skyrocket. It was good for those people who owned homes. It was getting a little tough for those people buying the houses. I mean, we saw some crazy things, right? We started to see over asking offers and there were multiple offers. So there were situations where you'd have a single house and they'd have 10 offers on it, all of them above asking. You got people who were like, you know what? I understand that it's going to take me $30,000 more to get this house. Here's the cash for it. I don't even need an appraisal. Yes, craziness. It got as crazy as people waiving their inspections, not even doing a due diligence on their home. And they're like, we just want to get inside of a home. There's not that many homes here and we just want to get into it. You got to understand, we're in the middle of COVID. So remember that most people got to work from home, unless you were like in the restaurant business or you worked at a hospital, like primary care or anything like that. But outside of that, most people were working from home. So a lot of people needed more space, right? Say you had a three bedroom house and a couple of kids. Where's your home office going to be? Right? So a lot of people needed the home office. A lot of kids weren't really going to school because schools were shut down. So you had to do some type of homeschool workaround. You definitely need the space for that. So around the 2020, 2021 timeframe, we were getting a lot of buyers wanting to purchase homes with that extra space so that they can make it a work, live, play space. That was the thing to do in 2020 and 2021. But again, you didn't have people really wanting to sell their homes. So homes that were able to accommodate these type of things for potential buyers, those became very valuable, which once it came on the market, people were like, I really need a home. I need to get in. And of course, once a lot of people start buying things, then you have that whole FOMO situation being created, fear of missing out for those who didn't understand FOMO. On top of that, Atlanta is just kind of one of those hot spots. We have pretty good weather throughout the year. It's a great place to live. We're in the Southeast, all that good stuff. So a lot of people were moving here, especially from like California, New York, Philadelphia, these people who bring a lot of money with them because the cost of living is so much higher where they are. But when they come here, it's almost pennies to them. So they can take their cash and outbid our people any day. And we were seeing so much of that. It was making local people frustrated. Pretty much everybody was frustrated if you're purchasing a home at some point in that time frame, because you're paying more than you expected to. You never expected to pay cash, and you're sitting there fighting tooth and nail with pretty much every offer that's going in. And speaking of offers, there was a lot of cash offers during this time. This is what was making it really tough. Remember those people that I mentioned from California, New York, and Philadelphia? We're getting a lot of cash offers from them as well. Obviously, if they sold their home in California, probably $1 million plus, they can come to Atlanta and get the same size home for like $500,000-$600,000. So they're taking the proceeds from their sales and just coming here to Atlanta and be able to outbid the local people here, which started to create a problem, of course, because if you want home ownership, obviously you want to be able to buy in your own city. And if a lot of people are coming in, buying in your city, then that starts to create a little bit of friction. Another thing that was making a huge impact on the housing market during that time were iBuyers. So these are your Zillows, your Open Doors of the world, where they were getting in the game and purchasing homes. Now, it was very interesting with them because they were coming in purchasing home cash higher than the average sales that was going on in certain neighborhoods. So they started running rampant in these neighborhoods, purchasing a bunch of houses. And that also made it tough for a lot of people. So imagine the situation that we're in, right? You have cash heavy people coming in from other states, purchasing homes. You have sellers right here in this state, Georgia, who don't want to sell because they don't know what's going on in the market. Then you have iBuyers, like your Zillows and Open Doors of the world, who are pretty much institutional investors or buyers, and they have a boatload of cash that they can spend on these houses. So you can imagine how crazy the market got at that certain time frame. Well, of course, the market got crazy, but what started to go crazy as well was inflation. Remember when I mentioned that they were holding these interest rates down? So a combination of them holding interest rates down and everybody having a little bit of extra money in their pocket created the supply and demand issue, and that's where inflation came from. So now we're heading to a point where everything is just expensive. It's expensive to live, it's expensive to eat, just everything is just slightly more expensive than people really wanted. The inflation issue started to, in my opinion, get out of hand. It got up really high. And finally, the government said, we got to do something about this. We have to curb inflation quite a bit because things are just getting too expensive, and this is really going to hurt the economy. So now we start easing into the situation that we're in right now, because in 2022, and I believe it was towards the end of 2021 and then into 2022, they started mentioning, hey, the feds are going to start raising rates. The feds are going to start raising rates. They really need to fight this inflation issue. So it started happening in 2022. And I'm not going to lie, just as fast as those rates dropped, they started increasing. And boy, I tell you, like, if you ever see your house payments at, say, a 2% interest rate versus a 7% interest rate, you can understand why the market came to a screeching halt, well, almost a screeching halt again. So yes, the rates went up pretty quickly. People started to realize, well, these home prices are pretty high too, and these rates are high. It's almost double the amount for me to pay for this house now than it would have been, say, a year ago. So that caused people to pump the brakes again. So towards the middle to end of 2022, even going into 2023 a little bit, the real estate market took a little bit of a hit. We started seeing that home values wasn't going up as fast as possible, as fast as it was previously. We started seeing some corrections in the market. So for a little while there, you had a little sweet spot, right? Especially, and I'm surprised that a lot of cash people didn't jump on this, but you started getting to a point, especially toward the end of 2022, where you can start negotiating on homes again. Because during COVID, you weren't doing any negotiating. It was, okay, I want this house. I got to do what I got to do to get this house. Towards the end of it, say in mid to late 2022, negotiating came back. So you could ask for closing costs. You could get the price reduced as well. At the same time, towards the end of 2022, of course, the government was trying to do everything to curb inflation. And how do you curb inflation? Well, here was their plan. They started to raise rates. And you got to understand, the rates that they're raising and mortgage rates are two completely different things. The rates that they were raising affects short-term loans. So think about your car loan, think about a HELOC, think about your credit cards, right? And the reason they're raising those rates is to get people to stop spending so much money. So if the things are more expensive based off of interest rates, so you're paying more in interest, then typically that'll slow things down. And it did slow it down a little bit, but that inflation was still pretty high. So one nugget that I want you all to know is that mortgage rates typically follow inflation, not these rate hikes that the feds are talking about. So the feds are raising rates for short-term loans to curb inflation. And then in turn, if inflation goes down, typically mortgage rates will follow those inflation. So that's what we're seeing right now, where you see every month the CPI report come out, the Consumer Price Index, that comes out every month, and they're pretty much measuring inflation. Then they turn around and say what they're going to be doing to continue to curb inflation. So that's where we're at today. And we're kind of seeing things back on the up and up. We saw in February that mortgage applications had jumped up a significant amount, leading to, well, following, with a bunch of sales as well. So we're seeing that mortgage rates, as those go down, more people are starting to buy. Now, what I can say with being out there in the market today's March 28th. So what I can say with being out there in the market, because the news is saying a lot of things, that homes aren't selling, maybe we're heading towards a crash again. And I can say in Atlanta, Georgia, just depending on where you are, that is completely false. I want you to know that real estate is hyperlocal. What's going on in Marietta is not the same thing that's going on in Decatur, Georgia. It's hyper local. It all depends on what's around you. So school is a big driver. If you have some pretty big, large attraction or recreational type activity that's near you, then that draws more people and makes your area more desirable. But if you're kind of like in Timbuktu and nothing's going on in that area, then that's a whole different type of real estate market out there. So perfect example, just had a listing up in Cumming, Georgia. That area is kind of known for its schools. That's why a lot of people move up there. And when I tell you I had the busiest open house I've ever had in my life, I am not joking. I am not kidding. Literally 100 people came through that weekend. The open house was so successful that we were able to get all the offers. We only had to be on the house that weekend, which was great for my sellers because they have 2 small kids, possibly one more on the way. And they just didn't want to have a bunch of people walking in and out of their house and doing showings. So we were able to find the offer and backup offers. Actually, we found 7 offers through doing the open house. And we got a couple that before the house was listed as well. So that kind of reminds you a little bit of 2020, 2021, and the beginning part of 2022. The only difference is that we still have I wouldn't say high interest rates because we've seen these rates before, but they're still in the high sixes, close to 7 as well, which is not very favorable for a lot of people. But at the same time, the demand is still there. You still got a lot of people on the sideline waiting to purchase a house. And if it's the right one, if it checks off all the boxes, they're still going to jump on it. So that's what we're seeing in the market right now. And that's pretty much the market update for Atlanta, Georgia, and just kind of the timeline of what's been going on here and why the real estate market is the way it is. So please stay tuned because as I mentioned before, we're going through the whole buyer's process. And I just wanted to let y'all have an understanding of how we got here today and what's going on in Atlanta real estate market today. So stay tuned and we'll be back soon.